In this lesson, what we'd like to do is show you some object-oriented programming and how you can do separate compiles or separate file compile. You have multiple files in one actual project. What we have here is we have a class called measurements. And let me bring up the measurements file here. This is actually the .h with the include file, and this is what you would see as a programmer. So this class has these public areas. It has measurements, which is the constructor, and it has grow, shrink, get height, weight, set weight, print height, and print weight, and it has two private areas, which is the data, height and weight, two integers. Now you'll notice something else about this too. At the top we have these compiler instructions. If not defined, measurements _h, define _h. This is always placed in object-oriented code for a very specific reason. Any project that you're working in may have the need to include several files of the same type in multiple locations. These compiler instructions up here actually tell the compiler, it's a directive, that if this class is already part of something else, you don't need to have it. If you do, then define it and call it measurements.h, and you'll notice that there's a int-if down here at the bottom. So if this is the first time that you've included this class inside your program, it will define it. If it comes along later, if it's already been defined, it'll skip over. So always put this kind of definition around your classes. The modern convention is make it the name of the class all uppercase, underscore, and then the uppercase letter H. That's the name you usually give it right here. Okay. All right, well, let's look at our class. Notice that we have the word class and the name of the class, measurements. That's what we'll use to define objects of this type. We have a, oops, let me undo that. We have a left bracket right here which says this is the beginning of the class. We have a public area followed by the prototypes of the usually the functions that are going to go into the class, and then we have the private area. Almost always contains the data. Occasionally you'll see functions in here too that are used by the class but have access to the private areas. So this is what the .h file is. Now if you look over to the left, this is in Microsoft Visual C++, you'll see this is under header files. Whenever you pull in a class, you're going to have to put the .h file in this location. The compiler will know where to find it. In the Apple version of this, using Xcode, you'll actually just add another file and it will automatically recognize it as a header file. Here are source files. The corresponding CPP file has to go in here. And let's take a look at that, and we'll take a look at this file, and this is where it has all of the code. Now you'll notice that in this code we have up at the top we have any libraries that we want, and we also include measurements.h. We include that file in here so it knows about it. We have the constructor. We know the constructor because it has no return type, much like this one. It has no return type, and it has the name of the class twice. We're passing in two parameters. So immediately we're going to set the height and weight. Now notice I'm calling functions inside this class. So if I've got code that already works, I'm not going to replicate. I'm just going to call it. So here is measurement set height. The type, the word measurements : By having this measurements : in here, okay, you'll notice that I can access the height directly. If you look back over into our class, you'll see it's in the private area. Right? But because I put measurements : it now has permission to access it. If the parameter that's passed in h is greater than 0, then it's a good height. So I say it is 1. Okay. So interesting files in here. We have another set weight. If the weight is greater than 0, we'll set the weight, otherwise it will set it to 1. Get height, they'll actually return a copy of the height. Notice that it's return type of integer. And set and get weight, it'll return the weight as an integer. Shrinking will reduce the height by 1. Grow will increase the height by one. Notice that shrink will not go below 1. Printing the weight, it'll print out the standard output, the weight in pounds. And what's interesting about the height is the height is stored as inches, and it will print out the height as feet. Notice we have our integer division right here, and then it will print out the remainder modulo as inches. So this is the class that we're going to use. Now, how to use it? Well, let's close these files up here. Save changes we made. Okay, so now we're going to create a new item, and we're going to create a main routine. We'll just go ahead and call it main. You can call it anything you want to. This is the routine that will have the int main void in it. So now we're going to include idle stream. Okay. And now we're also going to include measurements not 8. Now in this particular environment, notice that it's saying int measurements. Aha. Well, that tells me I'm doing something right. It recognized that the measurements.h is in my header code, so I can just hit the tab character, put another double quote right there, and I've got it included. Okay, using namespace standard. Okay. Okay. Now we'll do our main void, our standard program. All right, now to make an object of the class, we have to give it the class name, measurements, okay. Now, notice that the red mark went away. It immediately recognized that measurements is part of the class up there in measurements.8, so it's looking pretty good. So we'll give it a name, my size. Standard convention is to uppercase. Now I've got to pass it two things. I've got to pass it height and weight. So I'm going to say 86 for inches, and we'll say 200 pounds. All right. So that's calling the constructor. Okay. This actual code right here is what called that measurements : measurements. Okay. And now if I want to go ahead and start calling the routines in here, I take my size dot, and now you'll notice that what comes up is my options. All right, I can say get height, get weight, print height, print weight, set weight, shrink. Let's say I want to say set height. Okay, and I pass it 87. Okay, then what that does is it calls the file that's in measurements.8. It calls set height. Let's go back to this. It calls set height. Okay, and it passes in as age. It checks is age greater than 0. Yeah. Okay, then it sets that height to 87 instead of 86. Okay. Now I can my size, set weight. Okay. Let's say I lost some weight. Not much. Well, I lost a little. All right. And again, what it's going to do is it's actually going to call set weight, and if weight is greater than 0, the thing that I passed in, it will set it to that value. Otherwise, it will set it to 0, set it to 1. All right. Now, finally, let's just go ahead and we can do the rest of them. But let's say I want to print out what my height is. Okay, I can actually say my size. And I can say print height or print weight. I can also use the values. I can say cout my height is in inches. Okay, my size. Okay, get height. Okay. Very good. Save that. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and build this. Build solution. One failed. Okay. Let's look at this. Measurements get height to create a pointer to member. Okay. Okay, the problem was I didn't put a parens around that. Let's try that. Let's build this again. Build solution. Alright, that succeeded. So it looks pretty good. So let's review what we've got here. We've got a main routine. We've included our class up here, measurements.aids. We know that we've got our header file under header files. We've got two source files, one for the class, one for the main routine. We've written some code here. We declared measurements. We've called it my size, and we passed it 86 inches and 200. And if we go back and look at our constructor up at the top, we'll see that I'm passing in the height and the weight. Okay. Go to our main routine. I've set the height, reset it to 87, and set the weight to 99. And now I'm calling one of the functions that returns a height, and we'll see what happens. So it should return 87. So let's see what it does. We'll go ahead and run it. Okay, start debugging, and sure enough, this is my height in inches is 87. Okay. This is the way you use a class. This is the name of the class itself. Notice that this name matches what is in the measurements.aid as the name of the class up here. Okay, that name and the name that you declare it must be the same. This is what you're going to call it. This is actually called the object of type measurements. So that's the name you give it. You're passing in the height and the weight. And this is how you call functions that are part of that class. You pass it the object and then dot and then the function you want to work with that object and any parameters that are needed. Okay. Give this a try. This is a very, very simple little class. If you like to replicate it, here is, you can look at the code. Make sure that you copy it exactly. And here is measurements. I'll let you look at this. You can pause it all you want to, but look at the syntax of what I'm doing here. Very, very short little functions. Notice that the measurements, the name of the class, colon, is necessary if they're going to access any of the private members. Alright. Well, very good. Hope this was helpful.